It's actually the second time this year talking about Cloud Foundry, right? Mastering Cloud Foundry with Dynatrace episode 2. And with me, I start with the lady, Daniela. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And also Mike over there in Chicagoland.
Hello.
Hey, for those people that don't know you, maybe quickly introduce yourself on what your role is within Dynatrace.
So my role within Dynatrace is I'm part of the technical product management team, and I'm mostly focusing on broadening and deepening our support for Cloud Foundry monitoring.
Perfect. And Mike, how about you?
So I'm obviously Mike, and I am the technical partner manager for Pivotal and one of our Cloud Foundry SMEs. So, and for those of you that don't know, Andy's my boss. So if I do terribly on this webinar today, then maybe, I'll disappear somewhere.
We'll see. Oh, I have faith in you. So again, as a reminder, it will be recorded. Will be up on YouTube later on and on Dynatrace University. In case you want to see other episodes, you can see the links here. Also, make sure to get your own Dynatrace trial in case you don't have access to Dynatrace yet. Follow the link. We have a SaaS trial, but in case you need to do an on-premise trial, you will find the information about that as well. And the last plug on my end, Brian Wilson, one of our colleagues, and we run a podcast called Pure Performance. So you may want to listen in. And I had both Daniela and Mike actually on the Pure Performance podcast before. So you may find those episodes useful, and there's also a lot of other things happening. But now I want to switch over and give the stage to you. So Daniela, I will cut my video stream, but please keep your videos open. And folks, in case anybody has a question, please use the question feature of GoToWebinar, and I will moderate.
Perfect. Yeah, I would like to start with a recap of recently released product features for Cloud Foundry monitoring. So there has been a lot going on. So we started with adding Gorouter Metrics in version 145. So that was back in June last year already. We then also added the possibility to add process group metadata for Cloud Foundry applications, so you can easily add an owner or a GitHub link when using or by simply extending your Dynatrace Cloud Foundry service. So that was added in version 147. We then introduced process detection rules for Cloud Foundry applications. So these have been introduced to also work in the application-only monitoring case. We then moved on and focused a little bit more on the full stack scenario. So we added BOSH instance metadata for Cloud Foundry VMs. So these BOSH instance metadata like availability or deployment ID. So these are super useful for tagging, for creating management zones, for renaming probably your Cloud Foundry VMs, and that really helps to manage a large environment, to slice and dice your environment. With version 151, we added the Cloud Foundry organization property. So that property is pulled from the Cloud Foundry API. So we added an integration with the Cloud Foundry API, and since version 151, users and customers can now create management zones on top of that organization's property, which was a huge step going forward. We then moved on with detecting Cloud Foundry VMs and detecting Diego cells. Again, super useful if you want to filter your host list and you want to really focus on the Cloud Foundry parts. You can also use this functionality to pin all your Cloud Foundry Diego cells, for instance, to a custom dashboard, so you will immediately see if you have any problematic Diego cells in that environment. And then in November last year, version 156, we released the built-in Cloud Foundry overview pages. Again, big step, huge thing. I have a screenshot later on. And then with the March release this year, we added Auctioneer Metrics to the Cloud Foundry overview pages. and that will also be the focus point for today's clinic.
Cool. And then just as a side note, in case people want to see some of the other things that you just mentioned,
yeah.
I believe in episode 1 of our performance clinic, we covered most of these.
Yeah, so we covered basically, I think we covered the detection of the Cloud Foundry VMs and the Diego cells, as well as the built-in Cloud Foundry overview pages, but we have blog posts on all of these topics available on the product news blog. And yeah.
Cool.
Cool. So yeah, as mentioned in November, so this was the first release of the built-in Cloud Foundry screens. So the benefits you have here on this blue box on the right-hand side. So there's with Dynatrace, with the one agent, you have no dependency onto the Firehose. You're not required to deploy an additional nozzle. All you need is the one agent, which collects Cloud Foundry metrics at host and process level, and additional metrics, data like the organization property, but also number of organizations, number of spaces are pulled from the Cloud Foundry API. So that was the November release, and the teams worked hard to add additional metrics. So we focused on the Auctioneer metrics because Auctioneers are crucial for application task placement onto Diego cells. So if the Auctioneer is not working properly, then your applications won't be placed, your applications won't be accessible for your users, for your customers. And we again have the benefits that you do not need to have a dependency on the Firehose stream. No additional nozzle is needed. The one agent collects these metrics. So I also have an additional slide talking about the secret sauce and talking about how we detect the metrics. And what's also nice is that Auctioneers are automatically injected by the one agent, so there's no need to manually add the one agent if an Auctioneer process goes away and another one is brought up. And with the March release, so this has only been released 2 weeks ago, we've added the mentioned Auctioneer metrics, which you can see down here. I hope you can see my mouse pointer. So here are the Auctioneer metrics. So we focus on the average fetch states duration. We focus on failed app placements, started apps, and failed task placement. And later on, Mike will provide us with an awesome demo where he will replicate what you see on this screen. He will basically stress Diego cells and take care that we actually see some crazy Auctioneer metrics. What we also worked on really hard the past month is we have also improved the presentation and representation of the Gorouter metrics. So if I go back once again to the November release, then you see, so the Gorouter's card, we had a simple table, let's say, with all the metrics, where the metrics were also a little bit hidden, so you have to click on this expandable list, and we have improved this so that you can really focus on the relevant Gorouter metrics, that you see a trend. So what is going on with my Gorouters? Are my Gorouters healthy? And if there are problematic Gorouter processes, then you will also immediately get them listed on that card as well.
Cool. I just want to thanks for that. I mean, I'm not that familiar with Cloud Foundry and Gorouters and Auctioneers. And in case anybody out there in the audience wants to ask some specific questions, right, feel free to use the question feature in GoToWebinar, sure, and I will throw it over to you just as a reminder that
sure, of course,
they're open for questions.
Yeah, so all these platform components that we are focusing here, so these are all crucial and relevant for application placement. So that is really the focus point. Making sure that the applications are available to users that that applications are responsive. Yeah, and as mentioned earlier, so you can for instance pin all your DegoCell hosts onto a custom dashboard. You can pin all your hosts that have a Cloud Foundry tag on your custom dashboard. And you can, of course, also pin the Gorouter metrics and the Auctioneer metrics also on a custom dashboard. So you are really flexible here if you want to combine other information as well. If you want to enrich the built-in dashboard, then the custom dashboards are an awesome way to go here.
So one question just came in, and I want to ask you right away. With all these new metrics, is the Dynatrace AI Davis already looking at some of these metrics and kind of creating problems?
Mm-hmm. So Davis will pick up problems that occur on a process and on a host level. Mm-hmm. So we are currently working on making Davis aware about concrete Auctioneer, concrete Gorouter metrics. But as of today, Davis will, of course, pick up process level and host level problems.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, so I mentioned the secret sauce. So the secret sauce to our Cloud Foundry monitoring support really is our Go monitoring support. And why is that? So you may know that Go or Golang is a very popular programming language. It's the fourth most popular programming language overall, and it's used by nearly 2 million developers. And Dynatrace supports automatic code level insights into Go applications. And what's even more interesting is that Dynatrace also supports automatic code level insights into third-party Go-based applications. And Cloud Foundry, the Cloud Foundry platform is written almost as a whole in Go. So the Auctioneer component, the Gorouter component, so these are Go components, Go processes, and we can take advantage of Dynatrace's awesome Go support. And the Go monitoring support went just GA, so that happened only in January. Yeah, the 1H Go code module collects all these Cloud Foundry metrics that we can see today in the product, so the Gorouter metrics and the Auctioneer metrics. So these are pulled in by the Go code module, which is pretty awesome. Yeah, and you may now wonder, wow, there's a lot going on, but what's next? What is around the corner? So only with the April release, so this should only be a few weeks out, you will find a new and overworked and improved Cloud Foundry infographics on the top of the built-in screens. So we really focused on reducing to the max, really making this infographics better digestible, making our point here very clear. Then we also added Cloud Foundry Foundation properties. So you will find an Cloud Foundry API version and also the build version that we can get from the API. So that is helpful just to be aware what API version am I using, what build version am I using, and what's really interesting and really awesome, and where the teams did an awesome job is we will now be able, so with the next release, we will be able to detect the Bosch stem cell version, but also we will be able to detect whether Cloud Foundry Foundation, whether the vendor is pivotal or not. And we can also detect the PCF version. So for pivotal Cloud Foundry, we can detect on a host level the version information. So that is awesome, because typically the Cloud Foundry VMs that we had several discussions with the pivotal development team, and we're really asking, let's say, tricky questions to find out where to get this information, and we found a way to detect this, and our customers will be able to benefit of that as well.
Pretty cool. It's good to have a good collaboration with our partners,
Exactly.
obviously. Yeah.
Exactly. Cool. Yeah, and I guess that have been my last famous words, and I'm now happily handing over to Mike.
Yeah, perfect. Let's do the switch over. Mike, I think I just made you presenter.
Awesome.
I think you're still on mute. There you go.
Yeah, I was actually putting myself on mute because I have a very loud mechanical keyboard. So I was actually, doing a couple of things to actually get us to the point where we have lots of red in the environment. So one of the things that I've done here in order to kind of basically cause my environment to be in really sad shape is, for those of you familiar with Cloud Foundry and might have been, kicking the tires on the platform in the past, you may or may not be familiar with the application Spring Music. I know I'm so familiar with it that I actually see it in my sleep. But one of the things that I've done here is I've tried to create 30 instances of that all at the same time in an environment that's way too small for that to actually take place. So, if we go back and we look here at, Daniela and team's beautiful Cloud Foundry overview screen, you can see that I have a lot of different things kind of going on right now. My Diego cells are obviously completely pegged on CPU because they're trying to, basically start a very, very large number of JVMs all at the same time. And for anybody that's kind of familiar with Java, you know that, starting JVMs up is a little bit of a CPU-intensive task, even for really simple demo applications. And then you can see as well then that this failed application placement indicator has actually started to increase. As obviously as I mentioned before, my environment is not capable of supporting the number of applications that I've requested, right? So this failed application placements counter here is going to, basically tell us that, one of your operators or one of your app teams has, requested something that your environment is not able to do. Obviously, it has successfully started some of those containers. So you can see here that, the environment is seeing some application instances that have been started, but we are seeing those failures, and that's something that we would want to take a look at. And obviously, as well, you can see that, requests coming into the Go router are pretty heavily degraded at this time as well. And once again, this is one of those scenarios where I have overloaded the platform to the point where the apps have actually started to slow down. This doesn't always happen. Sometimes, problems with Diego CPU and stuff like that will not impact customer-facing applications, but in this particular instance it did. And I do want to kind of go back to, kind of a previous instance of this where, when I was actually replicating this scenario earlier, I basically had a situation where, I was doing the same exact thing, and I had all this CPU saturation, and it did cause my Spring Music service to be degraded by 7,923%, right? And I can see that in this particular example, I was impacting several users and several thousand service calls. And you can see all this great information that we're pulling over here into the root cause analysis, right? So we can see that there's been a lot of downtime on some of the processes. You can see that, we've got deployment events, we've got CPU saturation, we've got all these process restarts, response time degradation, and these metric anomalies. And all of these things are, basically all pulled together by the Dynatrace AI, now called Davis. And has basically told us that all of these things are all related to the same underlying issue, right? So instead of seeing, different alerts on each and every one of these components, it is all reflected in the one problem that is response time focused, right?
Hey, and Mike, because I think it just fits in, kind of going on, continuing the discussion or the question I brought up earlier, how does Dynatrace Davis look at these metrics. And what you're showing here, actually, the metric anomaly detection, this is actually a great place to explain that Dynatrace is actually looking at all these metrics already, because the new approach of our AI is walking through the complete dependency tree, looking at every single metric, and in case a metric behaves abnormal, it would show up here. And that's why every metric that Daniela you're pulling in would automatically be analyzed anyway, right? That's pretty cool.
Well, since we are a deterministic AI, we do like to understand what the impact of a metric is before just blindly plugging it into the root cause analysis model. So actually plugging these data elements into Davis is something that Daniela and I are currently working with the AI 2.0 team on actually bringing those things together. Right.
Awesome.
So what we're looking at now, you can see that the metrics that are brought in are things like response time and throughput, all the events in the environment and so on. But since we don't just blindly do machine learning on all metrics, because that's proven to be an invalid use case for operations, right? Because environments change too often for ML to be truly useful. We have to, work with that team to kind of train Davis ourselves on what some of these things mean. Cool.
And you guys are collaborating on this. It's perfect. Yeah.
Great. Yep. And then, going back to, obviously we showed, these data elements here in the overview screen, but I did want to make mention as well, you might have seen a very similar dashboard that Daniela had up on her slides, but this is that same dashboard live. All of those kind of key performance indicators coming out of, both Gorouter and Auctioneer, those are metrics that are available for custom charts as well, right? So obviously, I'm going to get up on my soapbox here for a minute, and one of the things that I try to tell people to do is like, hey, it's 2019, almost 2020. Maybe dashboarding is something that came out of the 70s. It's almost a 50-year-old technique. Maybe we should start to look at other things like allowing, Davis to make these determinations for us. But there are some folks that do like to make sure that they do have dashboards up on a screen somewhere for folks to take a look at. So obviously all of these KPIs are available for your custom charting needs, right?
And that also brings up another question that just comes in. If these metrics are available for custom charting, are they also exposed through the time series API?
Yes, so there we are currently working on that, and they will also be available via the let's say metrics
API.
Yeah,
perfect, cool, love it.
So I think this is really this is kind of a briefer performance clinic this time around, since we did kind of bring about some of these topics in our previous performance clinic a couple of months ago. And the focus here was really to kind of discuss some of those changes that we made in order to take a look at Auctioneer, and then obviously as well, to understand what it is that this metric actually means, right? And this application, in this particular metric, actually means that we're having a bad time, right? It basically means we're requesting more from the environment that the environment is able to give us. Obviously, there's other scenarios where these kinds of things can happen. One of the other scenarios that I mentioned to Daniela as she was preparing her blog post is, if I took this same environment with only 3 Diego cells and 3 Diego cells that are relatively small, if I do attempt to do a PaaS upgrade, right, because Cloud Foundry gives you the ability to upgrade an environment in place, right, and this is something that generally speaking you can do with zero downtime. However, you do need to ensure that your environment has the spare capacity to do that upgrade in place. Because what's going to happen here is this auctioneer process is going to drain applications from the Diego cell that's getting upgraded and try to put them on the other ones. And if you don't have enough spare excess capacity, your upgrade is going to result in applications going offline.
Yeah, that's a great way. So that means, I assume, Mike, and you're seeing, or Daniela and Mike, you're seeing more of these scenarios. So in an upgrade scenario, it makes sense use Dynatrace, I guess in the upgrade itself, but I'm sure people are testing their upgrade first on a different environment. Is that also, do people have different Cloud Foundry environments? And
Oh, most definitely. You know, and that's one of the things that, you know, led, you know, Daniela and the great team there to actually give us the ability to filter by BOSH deployment out of the box, right? Because if you have multiple Cloud Foundry deployments all pointing to the same Dynatrace instance, they're going to show up as different BOSH deployment IDs that you could use for your tagging purposes,
okay.
right?
Yeah, that's perfect. Hey, let's go into Q&A, maybe Mike, because there's a couple of questions coming in.
Sure.
And I think you started that thread right now because you picked the metric failed application placements. The question is, are there any other metrics that we should be looking for? Anything that indicates that something is wrong? I assume if I look at the average fetch states duration, Mike or Daniela, any best practices, anything out there that you can already say?
You know, so I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of chime in on a couple of different things here. I've actually looked over to the side because I actually have Daniela's webcam screen over here on my other monitor. So it's not like I'm looking at my cat or something like that for input. So, you know, things like average fetch states, you know, that's something that, you know, obviously we saw a big increase here at this point in time because I tried to scale so many containers at once. So obviously seeing this come to a really high value is something to keep an eye on. It's, you know, usually, you know, not necessarily cause and more effect, right?
Yeah.
You know, so obviously, you know, you'd look for the relationship between started apps and failed apps. So if you had, you know, started apps were, you know, relatively steady state or maybe even zero, and then somehow you saw a spike in failed app placements, you know, that means that it might not be an instance where, you know, where the environment is, you know, it might not be an instance where somebody requested something all at once. It might be an instance where, you know, maybe the environment was right at capacity and that next request actually took it over and kind of was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And then obviously looking at these things in concordance with, you know, our Gorouter metrics as well. You know, so obviously when our average response latency is gotten so high, you know, that's really a strong indicator that the environment is unhealthy because that basically means, you know, requests that used to take under a millisecond, you know, are now up around 285 or more milliseconds, right?
That's,
so
it's the latency of the router itself, right?
Yes. Well, it's the latency that's being reported by requests coming into the Gorouter.
Okay, cool. So if I may, and I kind of recap what I just learned, because again, I'm not an expert in this, but what I learned is from an auctioneer perspective, definitely have a look at the ratio between application placement and failed application placements. And that's obviously you should not have failed application placements, but in case you overload the system, you may end up in failed application placements. Most likely being seen by you're running out of resources on your Diego cells. And maybe a common scenario would be during upgrades, the auctioneer has to move your containers from one cell that it needs to drain to the others, and in case there's not enough resources available, then obviously you will run into these issues.
Correct, correct. So, you know, the key takeaway there is that, you know, the environment does a really good job of trying to heal around things, but you can obviously put the environment in a state where it's unable to do so. Yeah. Right. And that's, you know, generally speaking, that's because, you know, the operations team has, you know, kind of starved the environment of resources.
Exactly. And for instance, so we also learned for our development environment that is also used for acceptance tests. So there we do a repush of all of our applications at the same time, so in parallel. So that also leads to regularly failed app placements. And we inspected that, and for that specific environment, we didn't want to add another Diego cell. So we had to look at other ways. So the team has now found a way to not restart the apps in parallel, but to do this sequentially, and therefore not cause such spikes and not too much address this resource limitation that we have there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, we can basically see exactly the impact of that here.
Yeah.
Right, because basically we can see that this started applications continues to increment, but a lot of those, since I've oversubscribed the environment, a lot of those are actually crashing, so then they're getting started again, right? Because the environment is trying to heal around the problem, and you know, this is basically one of those, you know, scenarios where you know, now we've got a rush of healing actions, and if I don't take action, this environment will not recover.
Yeah. Okay, there's another question, more generic. What's the best way to actually monitor my Cloud Foundry environment with Dynatrace? What's the best rollout mechanism for the one agents?
So the best rollout mechanism is to use the one agent Bosch add-on or the one agent Bosch release, which is available on GitHub, which is also available on the Pivotal network. So that is a mechanism that this is a means to roll out the one agent onto your Bosch deployment, basically, and with that you'll get full stack visibility into your host, your processes, your complete foundation, and for the dashboard, you also need to connect to the API to get these information like organization and metrics we see here in the infographic, correct? So for that you go into settings and you connect your foundation.
Okay, cool.
But these are basically the two steps that you need to take.
So one agent deployment via Bosch, and then setting up the API so we can actually talk and pull in some of this metadata information. And then also, so populating this infographic screen is also pulling in the tags, as you said. That's also great. Yeah. The metadata. Perfect.
And Andy, if I might interject just one brief comment there as well, it is important to understand that, you know, the reason why we recommend the add-on approach here is because the add-on approach is actually what allows us to get these metrics in the first place, right? So if you're pursuing Cloud Foundry with application-only monitoring, where you're utilizing build pack extensions and things like that, you will not have access to these metrics.
Okay, that's obviously also a differentiator. If people may ask, so what makes Dynatrace different? And that's obviously our approach of full stack monitoring of Cloud Foundry environments and getting these metrics. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Is there, coming back to the metrics as a question now, can you set custom alerts right now on some of these metrics?
Not yet. So that is not yet possible, but that is something we are currently in the process of working with the Davis team.
Yeah, pretty cool. I think that's it with the questions right now that I've seen in the list. I think I learned a lot of new stuff. Right? I finally know what the Auctioneer's role is, I believe, right? It's kind of the orchestrator of the deployments and making sure that your containers are deployed at the right time into your system, and some great cool metrics that we have here. Daniela, or maybe Mike, you can bring it up quickly. The blog post, the recent blog post so that people see in case they want to find more. I know you had a reference in your slides, but I think it came out like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. So we described all the Auctioneer metrics, and we also described that example that Mike showed us here in a dedicated blog post. And this blog post does not yet cover the nice properties tile that you see up here, because that will only be available with the next release. But we are working in a sprint environment here, so that already has the next version available.
Cool. Well, that's nice. So that's the blog post. Thank you, Mike, for bringing it up. That's
no problem.
Yeah. And I think next week and also this week, end of March, I'm not sure when people are watching this, but I believe next week is a big event.
Yeah, Daniela, I think we wanna pass presenter to you because
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So before we go to that announcement, I would like to mention that we have on Dynatrace Answers, we do have a post where you find all the latest improvements, but also planned features for our Cloud Foundry monitoring support. So please share your feedback and ideas there. We are happy to start a discussion there as well.
I think that's similar to what the web dashboarding team has been doing for a while. That's a great way of just communicating with the community what's happening. Yeah.
Correct. Do you want to mention any other?
Yeah, I mean the other things are just the regular things that we have been promoting anyway. So make sure, or people be aware that there's a lot of online material out there, whether it's the university, whether it's the YouTube videos. There's also the power demos, which are really great from Daniel Carr. And then, all the other links, check out. We are also at different events from time to time. So make sure you are checking out where we present, where we speak, where we exhibit, so you can meet our teams. And the podcast, right? The performance podcast, that's always something to mention.
And speaking of meeting the team, so we do have some great Perform events coming up. So the next one is the Perform Summit in Barcelona, which will take place in May 21st to 23rd. So make sure to register now, make sure to be there to meet the team, discuss, and we also do have some Europe regional series, some Perform days, and also we are covering the APAC area, which is also awesome.
Exactly, yeah. And even though the screenshot here says September 2018, I think this is still the old screenshot, but obviously it will, no, that's my fault, I give you these slides. But the same is happening obviously this year again. So just check out the perform.dynatrace.com and you will find all these events. Yeah.
Cool.
And isn't there, so next week, look at that.
Now we are there where we wanted to go.
Yeah.
Yep. So we have CF Summit North America coming up next week, and hopefully folks that might be interested in Cloud Foundry content, we're already registered, but I have 3 talks there. So lightning talks are always fun. That's a 5-minute. That's a kind of like a 5-minute thing, and it'll be high energy. And I like to insert memes and stuff like that into those decks. So I always like to have a good time with those. I'm particularly excited about the technical deep dive that I'm doing on Thursday at 11:05. I'm going to be walking through some of the work I've done to bring Dynatrace and Concourse together to help you, better deploy your applications and collect feedback earlier in the cycle, and then to make Dynatrace aware of, what's happening from like a build metadata perspective. So I think that's going to be really neat, and that's going to be a highly technical session where I'm only going to have a handful of slides, and then I'm going to be sitting in an IDE for the bulk of that session. So that should be really fun. I will be tempting the demo gods pretty heavily with that one. So that's always fun and stressful, but I'm really excited about it. And then obviously the time has changed ever so slightly, but we do have a demo theater session around 2:05 or something like that on Thursday. Actually, I think the lightning talk now is at 3:05 p.m. But regardless, that link at the bottom of the slide here will actually take you to the most up-to-date times for all of these sessions.
Cool.
And
awesome.
And obviously, a good part of the team is going to be, manning our booth. I believe we're gold sponsors of the summit, so we're going to have a pretty big booth there. We're pretty excited to be there. So obviously, come have a chat with us.
Cool. Awesome. Cool. Well, then I would say, what's next? I'm sure there will be another episode 3, a couple of months down the road, I guess, right?
Yeah, maybe.
because there's a lot of stuff happening, obviously, always in this space.
Yeah. Yep. Every sprint brings some new fun stuff here. So
exactly. Yeah. So our goal is to really provide new features, new enhancements with each and every sprint for this whole cloud platform space. Yeah.
Very cool.
That's really our goal.
All right. So folks are listening in. First of all, thanks again to Denise, who is recording this and pushing it up as soon as possible to Dynatrace University as well as to YouTube. If you have questions later on, I'm pretty sure you can figure out how to contact us directly about names, or you can go to answers.dynatrace.com, and maybe, Daniela, if you go back once more, just the link, the short link, especially feedback on Cloud Foundry, Cloud Foundry specific feedback.
Yeah.
bit.ly, Cloud Foundry roadmap. That's great. So, thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks. Well.
Thanks for having us, Andy. As always, it was a pleasure.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, and also thanks to the audience for the questions. That's always good, because otherwise we are just talking, and it's good to see that people actually have questions. Yeah. All right.
Awesome.
See ya.
See you. Bye.
Bye-bye.